welcome to Table Tennis Philosophy. As I mentioned in some of the other videos, if you make some good comments, it's probably going to result in better content. And that's exactly what the case is today, as we had a comment from a subscriber in Israel, and it coincided right along with a new person that I coach, and their question and comment were about table tennis robots. And I don't like to sit on the fence too much on these things, just like with the thin handle blades, how I went ahead and said I like them better. I think there are some real advantages to them, but not everybody would agree with that, obviously. Table tennis robots, I'm not a huge fan, and let me let you know I've got some good reasons for that, but at the same time, a robot can be a good tool. Most of the time I'll tell people, don't try to use a robot as your primary training partner. If there's any way out of it, there are some better options. Almost hitting with a person is quite often a better option if you can find somebody that's you're compatible with. One thing with table tennis robots, I understand if you don't have access to other players, if you don't have access to a club where you can play regularly, and I would say, at least in my experience, hitting with a robot is what my last resort would be. Now, it's not just that it's maybe not as much fun as hitting with a person. There's some good reasons why robot training is really inferior and not going to help your game nearly as much as you think it will, and believe it or not, in some cases can hurt your game. Now, that doesn't mean, again, I wouldn't say nobody should ever have a robot. For coaches, especially in a group setting, especially with kids and beginners, robot can be a really, really good tool. And I've got a robot, and I'll show it to you in just a few minutes. But the reason that a robot can work against you is a robot is going to give you, if you set it up, unless you got a real high-end robot that can, change the speed and change the spin and oscillate and do all those things seamlessly. If you set it for one particular shot, say you want to work on your forehand drive, and you're doing your forehand drive over and over and over, that's a great thing if you're doing your drive exactly the right way. On the other hand, if you've never had any coaching, if there's flaws in your technique, hitting with a robot is going to reinforce the negative things that you're doing and make it actually harder to overcome those flaws in your strokes. Now, if, again, using a robot along with a coach, somebody that has watched your stroke, it's not such a bad thing to just have that repetition over and over and over, provided you're doing it the right way. There's a lot of options you can do with robots. You can set them for top spin, underspin, side top, side under, and robots have come a long way, and I will honestly say that I have not used the high-end ones. I have not used the ones that can be programmed to give you all kinds of variations, and I would think, as long as those are well maintained, those would probably be better, but not necessarily. The other drawback of a robot, it doesn't matter how much you spend on a robot and how great your robot is and how well maintained it is, it's not a person. So you think, well, what's it matter? It's going to give me better shots than some of the people I know, and probably would. The problem is, when you're playing, a lot of what you're looking for after you've made your shot is observing your opponent and following his body language, his or her body language, and anticipating what the next shot will be. You can sort of do that with a robot. If you watch the head of the robot and you know it's programmed to do a certain thing, yeah, you can anticipate, well, it's oscillating, I'm seeing it's moving towards my backhand, I can get set up for the backhand. It's quite a different thing than watching a person and picking up on the signals that they would give you. And give you two examples of where robots were probably overused. I had one example where I had a new person to coach, and I'm warming up with them, and my first impression was this player's probably a much higher level player than I am. They actually hit forehands and backhands really, really well. Their strokes were pretty much right, and they hit strong shots, and I was pretty impressed. Once we went away from basic forehands and backhands, they were really at a beginner level, and I was real curious about that. And I said, well, obviously you know how to play. What's going on? And they said, oh, well, I hit with the robot every single day. Now, at least in this case, they had gotten the strokes right. One way or another, had figured out the correct way to do the strokes, reinforce them. So they were fantastic at hitting forehands and backhands off of topspin. That was the extent of their game. And I would think that would have been very frustrating to realize that as good as those strokes were, and they were as good as anybody I knew at the time, it really still put them basically competing against beginners if they had gone to a league to play. All right, another example, somebody I coach, good player, former tennis player who really strong shots, really strong strokes, but doesn't have access to the ability to play a lot of different players. And I had coached him weekly until he moved, and then I saw him again after a couple of years, and he said, yeah, I've been playing every day. Well, what he'd been doing every day was hitting with the robot. And again, really nice strokes that he had developed. Tennis players, in my experience, quite often have very good forehands when they come to table tennis. Backhand usually doesn't translate quite as well from that sport to table tennis, but he had good serves, he'd practiced serves, he was very dedicated to it, and we played a match, and the one big hole in his game obviously was the unexpected ball, that particularly ones that came back to his backhand. He was so set up to go to his forehand and was unbalanced in his approach and really wasn't watching his opponent, which in this case was me. And even though his forehand was much stronger than mine, he had a good backhand, very consistent, could hit consistently with me. Again, probably a result of hitting with the robot. And in this case, again, had the basic strokes right, but it didn't translate near as much to playing matches as he would have expected. And in fact, I was surprised that he was as rusty as he was, but probably shouldn't have been, given that his only training partner had been a robot for the last year. So there's some things that are real downsides to robots, but I'll give you another one, and this may surprise you if you are looking at a robot and think, this is the perfect thing, this is where I can get my training when I don't have a partner. In the long run, it'll save me money from coaching or rounding up training partners or anything else, is eventually hitting with a robot gets kind of boring. And I've got a couple issues with robots on this, is where one of the joys of table tennis is that there's not any machinery involved in it. There's nothing more frustrating to me than hitting monotonously with a robot, or a robot that gets the ball jammed and it starts stalling. personally, the last thing I want in my life is more things that break down, more mechanical issues. With table tennis, normally, as long as I've got table, racket, ball, somebody to hit with, there's not too much that can go wrong there. But if you've ever seen a robot that was malfunctioning, and they do require some maintenance, it's really, really frustrating. And in fact, the robot I'm going to show you is not working. To be fair, had I maintained it, it would probably still work somewhat, but in the end, it became more frustrating than it was worth. So we're going to stop for a second and go take a look at the robot, and I'm going to tell you more things I don't like about table tennis robots. 1 second. All right, we're looking at a non-functioning table tennis robot made by Nuji. Actually, like I said, I want to be fair. Nuji's done a lot for table tennis, and they've been behind robots for a long, long time, and there is a place for them in the world of table tennis. But mine doesn't work, and even when it does work, it has some glitches. Balls get stuck, balls get jammed, sometimes they stall, but that's probably has as much to me not maintaining it as anything specifically wrong with the robot. And robot technology has come a long way. So this one's old. It is made for the 40 plus millimeter ball and all that, but I used it for a while, didn't feel like it was really worth maintaining and worth fixing. One of the problems, as you can see, it's set up right in the middle of the table, and realistically, every ball doesn't come from right in the middle of the table. If you didn't have this particular model and you had one that was more mobile, you could take it off. It wouldn't recycle the balls, but you could set it back on a stool back behind the table and perhaps get something a little more realistic. All right, now let's take a look at, here is the control center for it. You got ball speed, ball frequency, and oscillation. I found oscillation is where you start getting some stalling. You can't set this particular robot up for a fastball with no spin. The speed and spin are going to go together, and you can't do anything about that, at least with this type of robot. And ball frequency is, how often you're going to get a ball sent to you, and that's a handy thing to have, because sometimes you want to really slow it down for beginners and speed it up for more advanced players. My advice is, if you're going to use a robot, use it sparingly, use it correctly. I usually tell people that set the speed, spin setting down further than you would think. It gets it more realistic to what you're going to see when you first start playing. Probably set it on underspin and work on pushes. That's something that doesn't get practiced near enough. I think that's a much more valuable thing to do, is to work on looping off of underspin, or just getting used to underspin balls rather than setting it up on a consistent top spin shot that you're going to hit over and over and over. That is probably not exactly like what you're going to see in a match. And so you want to limit the amount of time you use with your robot, and realize that there are better things to do that would help your game probably more. Just practicing serves, and you will see that this robot does have that catch net, that even you can not use the robot, but use that net just to collect balls, and that's probably just about as good a use of your time, and probably better than hitting with a robot over and over. So I hate to be too down on table tennis robots, but I think they have their place. but they can certainly be overused. And I would say, you know, if you have any options on your table tennis, using a robot is, to me, sort of the last resort. They eventually get boring, and it's not going to replace a training partner. It's not going to replace a coach. If they did, we could all get robots, and we'd all be great players. But that tends not to work that way at all. But they have their place, and don't overuse them. Don't expect more of them than what they are capable of giving you, and realize that, at least in my case, they came complete with a few headaches, and that's why I haven't gotten this one fixed. So anyway, hope you liked it. I appreciate the comments that resulted in this content, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.